If you haven't figured it out by now, my name is John. I live in New York City. My seamless got delivered during the middle of this. If you know anything about me, you know that I love theater, but I also really have a special affinity for award ceremonies and caring way too much what goes on in them.
I have a medical condition, all right. It's called caring too much, and it's incurable!
This year I've made it a point to see as many Tony-nominated shows as possible in order to have an opinion and kind of an emotional investment in the ceremony. And since I did all of that, I guess you could call it work, to gain these opinions, I figured why not share those opinions and insight with you. So I figured the best way to go about this is for me to go over each category and tell you which nominee I think will win and which nominee I think should win. And in the process, I'll tell you a little bit about each nominee that I did or did not see. So I'm going to go over the minor categories pretty quickly first. Best Scenic Design of a Musical. The nominees are Groundhog Day the Musical, War Paint, Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, which I will from here on out refer to as The Great Comet, and Hello, Dolly. I'm going to say that The Great Comet will win, and I absolutely think I should. Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812 completely remodeled the Imperial Theater, made it a completely immersive space. The action goes on in and around the orchestra, the mezzanine, and on what used to be the stage. I'll also give an honorable mention, though, to Hello, Dolly. Sets like the sets that appear in Hello, Dolly have kind of become a thing of the past. Broadway theater is kind of moving towards this trend of minimalism, which I actually kind of enjoy, but it was a true joy to see a life-size train and a 3-story house, I guess a 3-story shop with a house attached to it, appear on stage. We have Best Costume Design of a Musical. The nominees are Anastasia, Hello, Dolly, Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, and War Paint. This is pretty easy. I think all 4 of these nominees are pretty outstanding, but for me, Hello, Dolly runs away with this one. This is the only show where the costumes got entrance applause, and it was deserved. Moving on to Best Lighting Design of a Musical. The nominees are Come From Away, Hello, Dolly, Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, and Dear Evan Hansen. This one, too easy. Great Comet will win, deserves it. Best Choreography. The nominees are Bandstand, Groundhog Day the Musical, Come From Away, Holiday Inn, and The Great Comet. This one is very difficult to call. I am going to guess that The Great Comet is going to win it. Out of these nominees, I actually don't really feel passionately about any of them. I think that Hello, Dolly should have been nominated and should have won the category. Out of these nominees, I'd probably say Holiday Inn was my favorite choreography. The last of the minor categories is Best Orchestrations. The nominees are Bandstand, Hello, Dolly, Dear Evan Hansen, and The Great Comet. I also don't feel terribly passionate about any of these. The best orchestrations I saw this year on Broadway were without question in the revival of Sunset Boulevard. With that show being out of the picture, I'm going to say that I think The Great Comet will win just because there are so many non-traditional instruments being played in non-traditional ways on stage, and it probably deserves it, but I won't really mind either way. Haven't seen Bandstand, so can't speak for that. Best Performance by an Actor in a Featured Role in a Musical first. The nominees are Gavin Creel in Hello, Dolly, Mike Feist in Dear Evan Hansen, Andrew Rannells in Falsettos, Lucas Steele in The Great Comet, and Brandon Uranowitz in Falsettos. Short disclaimer on this category. This is probably the category where I saw the least amount of nominees. I've actually only seen 2 of them. I have seen Dear Evan Hansen, The Great Comet, and I have seen Hello, Dolly, but I actually saw Gavin Creel's understudy, who was wonderful, but didn't see the Tony-nominated performance, so I can really only speak about 2 of these. Out of the 2, I'd probably say that Lucas Steele deserves it in Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. Mike Feist kind of came out of nowhere with this nomination. I don't think many were expecting it because his part is so small. I suppose he was serviceable in the role, but it wasn't anything that blew me away. I actually really loved Will Rowland in Dear Evan Hansen and thought he might get the nomination. Lucas Steele provides some pretty great vocals. He runs around that stage, has great stamina, and he plays the violin, which is pretty impressive. I have a feeling that Gavin Creel is probably going to win it. He's very well respected in the New York City theater community, I guess you could say he's overdue. That's a vocabulary word that kind of gets thrown around with awards ceremonies. And he's pretty great. And if he gives a performance that's anything like what his understudy gave, he probably deserves it. The nominees for Best Performance by an Actress in a Featured Role in a Musical are Kate Baldwin in Hello, Dolly, Stephanie J. Block in Falsettos, Jen Colella in Come From Away, Rachel Bay Jones in Dear Evan Hansen, and Mary Beth Peil in Anastasia. Again, I haven't seen Falsettos, I think due to the nature of that show. What I do know about it, I think that Stephanie J. Block and the two men nominated in the featured actor category stand a good chance. I just can't really chime in because I haven't seen them. With that said, from what I have seen, I think Rachel Bay Jones is going to win it, and she probably should. She gives a pretty vulnerable and authentic performance that really packs a great punch towards the end of that show, and it actually feels very necessary by the time her big song rolls around. I do want to give an honorable mention to Jen Colella of Come From Away. It's pretty awesome that she was nominated for this award because that show is so ensemble based and there's really no lead actor, and to a large extent I think her nomination kind of represents the whole ensemble, and it would be really great to see that ensemble recognized. Okay, Best Performance by an Actress in a Leading Role in a Musical. The nominees are Denée Benton in The Great Comet, Christine Ebersol in Warpaint, Patti LuPone in Warpaint, Bette Midler in Hello, Dolly, and Eva Noblezada in Miss Saigon. So first, let's talk about Bette Midler. If you're not familiar with this revival of Hello, Dolly, it's without question the event of the 2016-2017 theater season. Their marketing angle has basically been to not advertise the show. They've just put Bette Midler's name on above the title Hello, Dolly in big, bold red font, and that's been enough. The show is sold out through August, and I went during the second week of previews, and it's a celebration. Bette Midler, from the time she enters to the time she takes her final bow, completely commands that stage. Even if you're not familiar with the many iconic film roles she's played and iconic songs she's recorded, you can't help but feel that you're in the presence of a legend. Bette mostly plays the role as herself, but she's one of very few people in the world who can get away with it because her personality is larger than life and more than enough to fill the Schubert Theater and the role that is Dolly Levi. For that reason, I think Bette Midler is going to win in quite a tidal wave. In terms of the other nominees, I think Christine Ebersol and Patti LuPone's wins are their nominations. Both women are also legends, and they're both also two-time winners. The problem here is that the material that they're performing probably isn't anyone's favorite. But it's hard not to recognize the work they're doing because they're both giving valiant efforts. But because they've both won twice before, I don't think anyone will be in a rush to check them on their ballot. Denée Benton in The Great Comet also gives a wonderful performance, but I think up against these four other nominees, they suppose might kind of fall by the wayside. It's a kind of mild-mannered, quiet performance, which doesn't make it any easier, especially the fact that she's in an immersively staged show and has to run up and down stairs into the mezzanine, into the back of the orchestra, and a multi-level set. But there isn't anything, she doesn't really have that one moment that screams, "Give me the Tony," and makes her stand out above the rest. And that brings me to Eva Noblezada in Miss Saigon. I went to see Miss Saigon a little bit cynical, thinking that it just wasn't going to be as good as the original production, which I haven't seen live, but I have seen a recording of and heard many times. And the reason Eva Noblezada's performance has such big shoes to fill is because the role was originally played by Lea Salonga. Lea Salonga won a Tony Award for the performance and became an international superstar. She voiced 2 Disney princesses, played many other roles on Broadway, and is still, for many, a household name. I was pretty shocked by how impressed I was with Eva Noblezada, though. I think out of these 5 nominees, her role is definitely the rangiest, both in terms of vocals and acting ability. She's probably giving the strongest lead vocal performance on Broadway right now. There's not a note she doesn't nail, and she sounds like she's in great voice. and really is able to carry the emotional journey that very complex Claude Michel Schönberg and Alain Boublil's score has. I also believed her acting throughout. She's lucky that she still looks like she's 17 and has a very youthful, innocent look to her, and she's quite convincing in a lot of these scenes that take place in a war-torn country. And so for that reason, I actually think Eva Noblezada deserves the win here. It's probably not going to happen, though. It's going to be a tidal wave for Bette Midler, and nobody's going to be mad, including me. So moving on to Best Performance by an Actor in a Leading Role in a Musical. The nominees are Christian Borle in Falsettos, Josh Groban in The Great Comet, Andy Karl in Groundhog Day the Musical, David Hyde Pierce in Hello Dolly, Ben Platt in Dear Evan Hansen. Must again give you a disclaimer, I have not seen Christian Borle in Falsettos. I'm sure he was fantastic. Looking forward to the PBS Great Performances recording of it. Out of these 5 nominees, this is a very, very easy call. Ben Platt is going to win. Ben Platt deserves to win. Ben Platt earlier this month won the Drama League Award for Distinguished Performance, which is given to one actor, male or female, lead or supporting role in a play or a musical, and it is only awarded once in their lifetime. He's the youngest ever to win it, and that in and of itself tells me he has enough support to take this one. And with that said, he deserves it. I actually happen to have a lot of issues with Dear Evan Hansen. I think the hype is a little bit out of control. I do enjoy it, but the one thing that I cannot deny, and I don't think anyone can deny, is that Ben Platt is giving a transcendent performance. It's not just the fact that his vocals are pitch perfect. It's impossible not to relate to his character in one way or another, and part of that goes to the creators, but I think in many ways he elevated the material.
Evan, right?
Evan.
That's your name.
Yes, it is. It's Evan. Sorry.
Why are you sorry?
Because you said Evan, and then I said it. I repeated it, which is just, that is so annoying when people do that. So.
Andy Karl won the Olivier Award this year for the same role in Groundhog Day the Musical, and it's kind of a shame because in any other year he probably could have won the Tony. He largely carries Groundhog Day, which I suppose with a lesser actor and maybe not as clear direction could be a pretty mediocre show, but it's a quite enjoyable evening, largely because of his performance. Josh Groban also gives a fantastic performance in The Great Comet. The problem is it's barely a leading role. He is on stage the whole time, but he's not really engaging with the narrative, barely even half of the time. David Hyde Pierce is charming as heck in Hello Dolly, but I don't think he's really on track for the win here. The nominees for Best Book of a Musical are Come From Away, Dear Evan Hansen, Groundhog Day, and The Great Comet. This is also a difficult category. I think Dear Evan Hansen is going to win, and I want to say that it deserves it, but because it has such wonderful naturalistic dialogue and creates at least one really three-dimensional character who, and through that dialogue, it doesn't solely rely on the score to do that.
You know.
No, just, I've seen you play guitar in jazz band. I love jazz band. I love jazz. Well, not all jazz, but definitely like jazz band jazz. That's so weird. I'm sorry.
You apologize a lot.
I'm sorry. You know what I mean. That's fine.
However, I have a lot of qualms with that script just because of how it handles certain issues and the way it I feel that it kind of has an unearned resolution at the end. So for that reason, I think I would give the award to Come From Away because it's pretty ambitious to tell the story of 7,000 passengers and yet still come up with this emotionally satisfying narrative arc. The nominees for Best Original Score are also Come From Away, Dear Evan Hansen, Groundhog Day the Musical, and The Great Comet. This one is pretty clear-cut for me. I'm pretty sure Dear Evan Hansen is going to win it. It's become, I would say, largely the most singable music that's been introduced to a Broadway stage this year. I still listen to it. I think it's pretty great. But I think The Great Comet actually deserves it. I didn't leave The Great Comet humming any of the melodies, but since it's been a few months since I've seen it, and I've since gone back to the original Broadway cast recording. And simply listening to it evokes a lot of the feelings I felt watching the spectacle that is that immersive staging of War and Peace. And the music in The Great Comet is completely unprecedented. There's never been anything like it, and I feel like it is cohesive. It's very different, and I don't know that it's for everyone, but I think in terms of achievement, The Great Comet has the strongest original score this year.
And this is all your program. You are at the opera. Gonna have to study up a little bit if you want to keep with the plot.
Best direction of a musical. Christopher Ashley for Come From Away, Rachel Chavkin for The Great Comet, Michael Grief for Dear Evan Hansen, Matthew Warchus for Groundhog Day the Musical, and Jerry Zaks for Hello Dolly. This one is really tough to call. I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I think Michael Grief is going to win it for Dear Evan Hansen. He's a pretty beloved director. He directed both Rent and Next to Normal. In many ways, this feels like a big return to form for him, and I think he'll get a lot of support. However, I think Rachel Chavkin should win it for just the sheer innovation for her to bring an immersive musical to a Broadway theater. Now getting to Best Revival of a Musical, the nominees are Falsettos, Hello Dolly, and Miss Saigon. Didn't see Falsettos, which is a shame. I wish I could chime in on it. This one's pretty easy. Hello Dolly's winning, and yeah, it should. It's kind of a shame that Miss Saigon has to be up against Hello Dolly. I think Miss Saigon wasn't met with the most favorable of critical reviews, but for the most part, audiences I've talked to seem to have really enjoyed it, and I was frankly shocked by how much I enjoyed it. And I think it's a pretty pitch-perfect revival that deserves recognition, so I'm pretty thrilled to see it nominated here. And lastly, the nominees for Best Musical are Come From Away, Dear Evan Hansen, Groundhog Day the Musical, and Natasha Pierre and The Great Comet of 1812. This is a difficult year for me. I don't see any of these four nominees becoming some of my most cherished theater experiences. I really loved all four of them for different reasons. Groundhog Day was definitely the biggest surprise for me. I went into it thinking I would absolutely hate it. One, because I'm sick of movie adaptations, and two, because this movie doesn't seem like anything that can be lent to the Broadway stage. But Groundhog Day actually uses some ingenious theatrical devices that make it feel like a very theatrical experience and make it feel fresh and like a reimagination of a classic story. And it also features a pretty terrific performance by Andy Carl, and for that reason, I felt that it was just a really unpretentious, simple, entertaining evening, and for that, I think it's earned its nomination. The Great Comet, I kind of talked about earlier, is really unprecedented in any way. It's an immersive staging of a musical on Broadway. A theater had to be completely redesigned in order to accommodate it. Just simply walking into that space is, in and of itself, is an experience. It isn't the most memorable show for me. It definitely was the most sensory, and I got chills during The Great Comet more than any other show. But I don't know that it emotionally impacted me as much as it could have. And perhaps that's because the space is simply so big, and The Great Comet was initially staged in a very small off-Broadway theater, and again in a tent, and I feel like I might have enjoyed it in that more intimate space, and I would have been able to engage with the narrative a little bit more had that been the case. Dear Evan Hansen, I would say, is the overwhelming favorite this year. It's definitely the most beloved and moving the most tickets out of these four, I would assume. At least it's definitely the hardest ticket to snatch up. As I said earlier, it's definitely got the best lead performance of any musical this year. Ben Platt is sure to become a household name and really a superstar if he plays his cards right because of this show. But as I said earlier, I do have a couple fundamental issues with the book, and I guess it's just an unearned band-aid resolution that it places on a very complex issue, and to me feels just a little bit unfinished. And for that reason, I don't know that it's sending the best message to the teenagers that are watching it. However, as a whole, it's a very moving experience with beautiful music and a beautiful performance. And that brings me to Come From Away. Come From Away is also pretty unprecedented. An ensemble of, I believe, 8 actors is playing over 50 characters throughout the course of the evening, and what's miraculous is it's completely crystal clear who is who. The narrative arc is perfectly clear, and what's most miraculous about Come From Away is it's completely unifying. By the time the curtain call comes around, I felt like I had bonded with everyone I was sitting around. I went by myself, but it was the most unanimous and celebratory curtain call that I can remember in a while. In fact, the entire audience all stayed standing in front of their seats, not only until after the cast had exited the stage, but the band had finished playing, if that tells you anything about the power of this show. I don't think it's a perfect show, but I think out of these four, it's the most solidly crafted, and it has the most heart, and probably the cleanest script. So for that reason, I think Come From Away should win the Tony for Best Musical this year.
Suddenly I've got my earwig. Suddenly all of those pilots protesting me. Well, they can get their own drinks.
Dear Evan Hansen will probably walk away with it just because the hype is pretty big. It's all over mainstream television. It's the hardest ticket to get. All of the celebrities are going to see it. But I think it should be Come From Away. And there you have it. That's me chiming in on this year's Tony nominees in the musical categories, and I will be chiming in on the play categories, which maybe you're not as interested in, but it's a much bigger deal for me. So look forward to that. See you next time.